Welcome to Peru Day's first segment. My name is Carla Martinez, General Manager of the Chamber of Commerce Canada Peru, organization in charge of promoting Peru's participation in the PDAC. I would like to thank all the Peruvian institutions that made possible the organization of the Peru Day: the Ministry of Energy and Mines, Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, INGEMET, and PROMPERU. I would also like to thank our diamond sponsors: Anglo American, Antamina, Barrick, Cerro Verde, Contacto, ENG, Goldfields, Hadbay, Calpa, MMG Las Bambas, Poderosa, Sierra Metals, Southern Copper Corporation, Suma Gold, Epiroc, Nexa Resources, Condumex, E29 Resources, and NLX. Also our platinum sponsors: Confipetrol, Incimet, Ferreiros, Hatch, Montali, M3 Engineering, Cumbra Engineering and Construction, Newrest, MSA Inversiones Perú, Reliant Ventures, Tecnofast, Cluster Minero del Sur del Perú, and Pan American Silver. And also our gold sponsors: Anchiles, Bear Creek, Coretech, Scotiabank, Techin, Renasa, SNC, Lavalin, Explomin, and Construcciones Rubao. Thank you very much. In this Peru Day, speakers and panelists will present the reasons that make Peru a highly competitive mining destination. But before leaving the floor to José Tudela, President of the PDAC's 2021 Peruvian Delegation, I would like to present a video produced by the Chamber of Commerce Canada Peru and F45 called Mining Pride.
2021 will still be challenging for all of us. Reality changed our habits and our way of working, of studying, and of training. We are taking care of ourselves, but at the same time, we are supporting the population of our areas of mining influence, while we face the challenge to emerge strengthened. We are not gathered today. Nonetheless, technology allows us to keep together, to learn and exchange ideas virtually. Mining is the sector that has recovered the fastest. In 6 months, it has returned to its pre-pandemic production levels, and it contributes 14% of the gross domestic product. In Peru, we can add value in deposits that will allow us to double the mining production in the next coming years. We have great investment opportunities. We will recover the growth, the employment, and we will have overcome the pandemic. We are a country that shelters diverse potentialities and also diverse cultures. At the same time, we are open to the world, working and producing with very strict sanitary protocols. Mining in Peru is the #1 income generator. It takes care of the environment, makes proper use of water resources. We start the wheel of progress, of development, and well-being of the country. Fortunately, the world economy is accompanying us, demanding more metals, and in Peru, we have them all, and for everyone to invest and produce. We are waiting for you. We are willing to keep fueling and accelerating the engine of history that gathers us today. The future is you. PDAC 2021.
Without further ado, please welcome José Tudela.
Thank you so much, Carla, for that kind introduction. Good morning, all, and be welcome. My name is José Tudela, and I am the president of the Peruvian Delegation to PDAC 2021. For me, it's an honor to welcome you to Peru Day, as we will have a PDAC in an online format just for this year, in which we will see an opportunity to join from anywhere in the globe. Before we continue, I would like to thank all the governmental institutions that have allowed Peru's participation in this PDAC 2021. Many thanks to the Ministry of Energy and Mines, to the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, to the Geological Mining and Metallurgical Institute, INGEMET, and Peru Export and Tourism Promotion Agency, PROMPERU. Thank you all for your kind support. Peru will present several activities with the aim of showing the competitive advantages of investment in our country. Peru Day is one of them, in which we will go over the perks of investing in Peru. The economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly been the most complex one throughout Peruvian history. According to the World Bank, a total shutdown resulted in a 17.4% fall in the total GDP during the first half of 2020. Nonetheless, as Peruvians are resilient and hardworking. And the World Bank estimated this January a 7.6% recovery in the Peruvian GDP. This is the 0.6% more than expected by them by June of 2020. The World Bank also mentioned that Peru will leverage its growth in 2021 from the increase in copper prices and the current flexible monetary policies. Taking this into account, the World Bank expects Peru to have the largest growth out of the Pacific Alliance countries. Regarding the mining sector, the official figures show that mineral production levels were stabilized on that same quarter of 2020. And in some cases, they are equal or have overpassed such pre-pandemic levels. In addition to that, the Ministry of Energy and Mines has updated the project portfolio regarding construction, expansion, or improvement. These overpass an investment of 56 billion and 158. Thus, Peru is still a promising destination for foreign mining investment. And that's the message that we would like to convey in this PDAC. Thank you so much for being here. And now I give the floor to our national and international speakers that will present Peru as a country of mining opportunities. Thank you so much, and please be welcome.
Thank you very much, Pepe, for your words. I would like to mention that this is the first time that Peru Day is developed virtually. In 2022, we will be back to the face-to-face modality. It is very important for Peru to participate in the PDAC, the largest and most important mining convention in the world. This mega event is the perfect place to show all of our competitive advantages. For the 8th year in a row, Peru is a PDAC sponsor, which gives our country a strategic position before important mining investors from around the globe. It's important to mention that this year, the virtual mode has been beneficial for Peru, as more interested parties are able to attend the convention from any part of the world. Therefore, a large amount of people will be able to know the competitive advantages offered by Peru. Please welcome the renowned Peruvian political analyst, Jaime de Althaus.
Well, thank you very much for letting me address you in this very important forum, but I will express me in Spanish because it's more efficient for my communication. Well,
the first thing that I would like to mention is that Peru has one of the largest macroeconomies in the world. However, we have a lot of weakness institutionality. Here we have the Global Competitiveness Report of 2019 made by the World Economic Forum, and here we can see that Peru ranked 65 out of 141 economies. However, when we talk about macroeconomic stability, we ranked in first place. We ranked first. So Peru, in the last 25 years, has had a large macroeconomic stability that we can see here in a public debt that is one of the lowest ones in all of the Pacific Alliance countries such as Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, which Peru is also a member. We also have the lowest fiscal deficit in comparison to those countries. Peru also has the highest international reserves regarding the GDP at 29%, and we also have the lowest inflation in comparison to such countries. So as a consequence of that, Peru has all of these fiscal and macroeconomic strengths that have enabled the country to launch one of the biggest and largest economic plans to fight against COVID-19. Indeed, some of the measures that were implemented in Peru were in form of credits and loans for the companies so they could survive during the strictive quarantine that we went through, and a lot of bonds and some other transfers. These were included in the GDP. And our GDP was higher in comparison to all of those Latin American countries of the region, or at least the countries of the Pacific Alliance, as well as other countries in the region. Nonetheless, Peru had one of the deepest falls in comparison to other countries of the region. This was due to a restrictive shutdown that was ruled by the government. We basically had a shutdown of every economic sector, and regarding the mining sector, we only had some essential activities. We lost the farming and the agricultural sector as well. So this resulted in a very deep fall, as you can see on the screen. However, the recovery has been really fast and has been the fastest among many other countries. I think that, in fact, we are just behind Brazil in comparison to the rates of recovery, of economic recovery that we have had in comparison to such levels that we had before the pandemic. And the productivity levels are even better than the ones that we used to have in 2019. And regarding the cement consumption internally was even higher starting September, as we can see here, than even before the pandemic. And we have had a lot of reconstruction and construction activities to remodel houses to be able to adapt themselves to the pandemic. However, now we are experiencing a second wave of COVID-19 that threatens to be worse than the first one. Here you can see on the screen the total deaths for all causes as of Sunday of January 31st. And now we see that the curve is really strong. So as of that, the government decided to implement a lockdown of 15 days. So it started on January 31st. And this is why right now I am recording this at home, and probably we will have another 15 days of lockdown. So the important thing here is that the bulk of vaccines will probably arrive after April in general. We were supposed to receive about 15 million vaccines of Sinopharm, and by May, maybe 17 million, but that is not yet confirmed. So we will have some months in which we are going to experience the second wave that can probably threaten this economic recovery. Even though this second lockdown is being more flexible and less restrictive than the first one, because we are having many economic activities in place that weren't allowed in the first lockdown, such as mining, farming, and agriculture, construction. These are sectors that are allowed to operate. So we will probably have not such of a deep fall as we had in the first lockdown. So the problem is that there were some anarchy days in which we had this presidential changes. We basically had 3 different presidents in 15 days. And this happened because they impeached President Vizcarra, and then we had the president of the Congress that was
then elected. And then we had some social conflicts that also took him down from the administration, and then we are having a third president. We had these anarchy days in which police was heavily criticized for its actions. Then we had some blockages in the roads because they were having some protests regarding the agro-export sector, which is a very important sector in Peru. And then the police decided not to act during these 5 days, in which we had even more severe consequences. So then the government decided to repeal the agrarian promotion law, which unfortunately I think that has been one of the best laws for this sector in the last 2 decades, that has promoted a really productive agro-export sector, promoting formalization in a really informal sector. So unfortunately, the Congress decided to repeal that law and passed another law that really jeopardizes production costs in general. And I think that will have negative consequences in the productivity of the sector. And what will happen is that small and medium companies, export companies, will decide to go informal, or will sell, or will be sold to the largest corporations, and we will be losing a lot of jobs. So as a consequence of this redistributive law, in which we will have more informality and more inequality, we are having now a structural dualism that will be more accentuated, unfortunately. So this formal agricultural sector that we have been developing in these last 2 decades was the only sector that during the pandemic last year didn't lose jobs. Indeed, we had more jobs created in this sector. So in 2020, we had 581,000 jobs for this agro-export sector, and a year before we used to have 497,000. So it creates an increase of 16.8% in comparison to other sectors that unfortunately lost jobs. So basically, this is what happened with the agro-export sector, a very important player in Peruvian's economy in the last 2 decades. However, another important drive for the economy in Peru is mining. However, the mining sector has been heavily criticized by politics, by society, as we have seen in the last couple of years, particularly as we have had some blockages of roads, of mines, to avoid having the extraction of minerals to get better rents or revenues by the mining corporations, and the communities create blockages to have better funds or better benefits or a better participation in the utilities, etc. This is something that has been happening in the country for a very long time, and we have not yet found a solution. The administration hasn't found the right governance to create the right strategies, and I hope that we will find the right tools to solve that soon. So now we have a leftist candidate, who is Veronica Mendoza, that has mentioned that for the mining sector, we would need to have a new labor regime, and this has happened for the agro-export sector as well. And in her government plan, she basically proposes to increase the taxes in the mining sector, which basically already pays a high taxes amount. And then she's also planning to implement this new labor regime and to have a more restrictive environmental standard regarding all the environmental assessment plans. So in that sense, this could be something that might show up. So what we have seen, especially in those anarchy days, is that Peru usually has this syndrome or this disease that we can see reflected in our economy, is that we have an institutional and political precariousness. Unfortunately, we have many political parties, but just a few are really strong parties. We have a lot of opportunistic party legislators. We have a weak administration, and as a consequence, we have this institutional and political precariousness that I think that even promotes social protests and social demands, as we have seen, like the one against the agro exports. And unfortunately, we have organized formal sectors, and we have political organizations that are somewhat radical that put pressure on the Congress. And right now we're having a transitory Congress as a result of the dissolution of the former Congress. So as of now, the president doesn't have the majority in most of the legislators in the Congress. There is a lot of populism, and as of that, the Congress has passed redistributive laws for certain sectors that are really opportunistic and that unfortunately decrease the productivity levels, and that creates more informality, and this is a vicious circle that is created, and they are all connected. They are intertwined because these organized formal sectors and political organizations use all of these to create social conflicts and social protests to get those redistributive laws. This needs to be solved because this could create a degeneration of the results that we have been trying to get. On the other hand, we see that the Congress has passed some laws that are generating a definanced state. The Congress has repealed many laws that, if we put them together, these are creating a greater and a larger permanent fiscal debt, representing a 5.87% of the GDP. That means almost 6% of a greater fiscal expenditure. Some of these laws could be repealed by the Constitutional Tribunal. However, this would be the result if these laws would be passed. And in the same time, the Congress has passed other laws, such as the Agricultural Labor Regime Law, and we have another law that is trying to create limits on bank interest rates, and that is not confirmed yet, but this will be reviewed by the Constitutional Tribunal. And then we are having another law regarding a reduction of the pension funds because they are trying to redistribute those funds among people. Anyways, on the one hand, we are having some laws that are incrementing the fiscal debt, that are increasing the fiscal debt, and on the other side, we have these laws that are reducing the growth rate, and that means less fiscal revenue. As a result of this, we have a structural deficit. And of course, if this comes true in such a way, that will be very unfortunate because, as we were saying in the very beginning, Peru is still one of the countries that has a great fiscal and macroeconomic stability. We are ranked first in the world in that. It's not fair that the Congress is trying to repeal laws that are worsening our situation, our stability. And furthermore, we are also facing the risk of changing our constitution. In our constitution, we have an economic chapter that is really important, in which we have a free market economy. And one of the main principles is the subsidiary principle. That means that the state is only able to intervene in such areas where the private sector is not able to participate. That is in our constitution. So now we have the candidate that is ranked first in the elections is George Forsyth. He's not trying to make a referendum on that principle, but he's trying to clarify this principle to enable trust in mining areas, for example, in order to facilitate social acceptance and social feasibility of the projects. In reality, we are not sure why there is a need to clarify this principle to facilitate trust, but however, that is included in his government plan. But worse than that is what Veronica Mendoza is proposing, which is a leftist candidate that is having an important position in the rankings. And she's proposing a constitutional change and, of course, changing part of the economic chapter in the Constitution in order for her to establish a more planified economy with a greater participation of the state. We still don't have a majority in the Congress to call upon a referendum for a new constitution, but she is proposing that if she gets to the administration, she will call upon a referendum, a constitutional assembly, to create that. However, we have done a survey asking people why they think they would like to change the Constitution. So most of these people think that they would like to change the Constitution to have tougher punishments for criminals and for corrupted people. So that would be the 50% of people that think that they want to have tougher punishment to criminals. And 19% thinks that they would like to change the Constitution to create reforms in the political system. And then the 17%, that is 1 out of 6 Peruvians, think that they would like to change the Constitution to have a better participation of the state in the economy. So basically, people don't want to change how the economy works. They just want to have a better democracy, a better sense of security, and to fight against criminality and crime. But if we try to analyze the proposals of these candidates, we see these groups of candidates in which on the left side we have Forsyth, George Forsyth, has been the goalkeeper of one of the most popular soccer teams in Peru, which is Alianza Lima. And he's basically an outsider. He has been a mayor in one of the districts in Lima. And that's why people find him attractive in this framework in which people are constantly rejecting pre-existing politicians and they are trying to find new people. That's why he's ranking first. Even though his message is not clear, then we have Julio Guzman, who is from the center left. Then we have Keiko Fujimori, who is from the right wing or right popular wing. She's the daughter of Alberto Fujimori, who is in prison. And then we have Daniel Urresti, who has this heavy hand message, who used to be a lieutenant from the military. And then we have on the other side Veronica Mendoza, the leftist candidate. And then Johnny Lescano, he's growing even more in the rankings, who has a historical political party, Acción Popular. However, he's having a very populist economical proposal against banks, against big corporations, and against abuses. So the group in blue is trying to maintain the same constitution. However, Forsyth is looking to clarify the principle of state subsidiarity. Then, on the other hand, on the red group, they are trying to create a new constitution and to have a more participation and more intervention from the state. Then the blue group is trying to create a true social market economy. Then the other group is not trying to have a true social market economy, but rather a new productive matrix with more added value, to have better ecological plans, to fight against monopolies. They are both proposing the same. They are trying to control the interest rates. And then Lescano is proposing to create a deglobalization of the economy to strengthen national economy. This center-right group in blue is proposing the formalization of the companies and of the employment. We have a lot of informality regarding employment in Peru, which is basically a 70% of the economically active people. And then Veronica Mendoza is trying to create more labor stability, but that would be not beneficial for formality. Then the group in blue is trying to create a more progressive tax system, especially for Forsyth and Guzman. However, Mendoza and Lescano are trying to implement a tax on wealth. Then the blue group is trying to facilitate a meritocratic state, and Mendoza and Lescano are looking for implementing an economy plan in state. The blue group is trying to create a more dynamic development of the mining sector. However, Veronica Mendoza is proposing to implement more taxes and a more restrictive regulation regarding the environment. So we have these candidates that are wanting to have a better intervention of the state, and then these others that move towards the market. So now we are seeing a second wave that we are having and experiencing right now, and we have this scandal because of the vaccines in which the former president de Vizcarra was vaccinated in secretly vaccinated. So here we have seen better approval of these candidates from the left that we mentioned, especially Johnny Lescano, implementing this leftist proposal. He is now ranking first with an 11.3%. It's very low, but as the Peruvian context shows, that is the best he can get. And then we can see that he has had a very important increase in the last couple of months, and he is ranking at an 11.3%, and he could expect to grow even more. And then Johnny Lescano has pretty radical proposals regarding the left wing, but he but he belongs to Acción Popular, which is a very historical political party in Peru. So he is disguising himself in this political party because he used to be in the Congress before, and he has always fought against the abuse of large corporations and favoring the consumers. Then we have Veronica Mendoza, which comes from a more ideological leftist perspective. She has gone up by 1 point. Especially Lescano, he has grown at the cost of George Forsyth, who used to be first. Here we can see how he was doing, and then he has had a really severe fall. He was at 8%, I think, and now he's ranking third. He's a young candidate. He's a pretty well-known candidate because he used to be the goalkeeper in a very popular soccer team, Alianza Lima. He used to be the mayor of La Victoria. However, he doesn't have a clear message. So he's like a popular outsider, regardless of not having a strong message. And as of now, his candidacy is falling down. Then Keiko Fujimori, which comes from this center-right perspective, she maintains this 8.1%. This number could grow eventually. Then Daniel Urresti, who is trying to implement this heavy hand perspective against crime. And then we have Lescano and Mendoza, who are on the top. They are trying to create a polarization and to go to the second round. And unfortunately, to avoid a second round, we would need to have a candidate that will get 50% of approval or more. Then we are having López Aliaga, who some people say that is from the extremist right wing or of the populist right wing. He's a very conservative and very religious candidate. And he has this liberal perspective regarding the economy. However, he's trying to attack banks, monopolies, and maybe some of the more important powers. And basically, he's having some sort of leftist message, nevertheless. And he has grown steadily at 7.6%. His increase has been one of the quickest ones. So there are some people who say that we can have a second round with Yoni Lescano and with Rafael López Aliaga, this populist that says being of the right wing. However, we are not completely sure, because if you see here, a lot of people who are undecided yet, people who haven't made up their minds, are 31%. It's a very strong percentage. So we are unsure of what will happen. I think that anything can happen in Peru. And then the elections, sometimes in the last weeks before the elections, tend to make a decision. So sometimes when they are in the queue for making their vote, they decide and make up their minds. So we are not sure about that, but what we are sure is that we will have a very fragmented Congress, such as the current Congress, and this will be a very populist Congress. And as of that, governance will be a very hard thing to do. We will have about 8 different parties in the Congress. And now the problem is that the next administration, the next president, will need to have a majority in order for him or her to rule. Something that has become a really difficult task now with the pandemic and the political instability. So as of that, this person will need to create a coalition government. And if not, if this person doesn't get to a coalition to create a majority, we will be talking about closing the Congress as a perspective. Or maybe the president could censor two different political parties to create this dissolution of the Congress. That would probably be what could happen in order for the president to achieve the majority. The other possibility would be that before dissoluting the Congress, this person, the president, will be impeached by the Congress. Some other scenarios that could happen could be that if the president is authoritarian or populist, will decide to close the Congress, and that won't call to new elections, and that we will have an authoritarian and populist rule. So we were talking about getting a majority to have the right governance, because we have so many large risks. So the president will need to be in charge of solving this structural deficit generated by this Congress, and this president will need to repeal some of the laws to avoid permanent damages in our economy. This president will need to work towards a meritocratic state and to pass some productivity reforms to have better productivity levels, and that we can get up to 4 or 5%, because otherwise, if we don't create this macroeconomic growth conducted by the Ministry of Economy and Finance, then we will have permanent damages that started with the pandemic, in which we had a drop higher than 10%. So we need to solve that. And for that, we need to have better growth rates. Those are the challenges for the next administration that will have a definitely complex Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. de Althaus, for your excellent analysis. The pandemic stopped the 21 years of Peru's consecutive economic growth. In response of the crisis caused by the first wave, Peru implemented a set of tax and financial policies to reactivate the economy. To date, partially thanks to these policies, the economy in Peru has recovered faster than in other Latin American countries. Even though this has weakened some macroeconomic indicators, Peru's current economic situation is such that it's helping the country to endure the second wave. The authorities face a challenge to properly use the resources available thanks to the decades of macroeconomic discipline. To clearly understand Peru's macroeconomic situation, I leave the floor to Diego Macera, General Manager of the Peruvian Institute of Economy, who will analyze the situation. Welcome, Diego.
Thank you so much for having me here. I am Diego Macera. I'm the General Manager of the Peruvian Institute of Economics. In this presentation, we're going to frame it in four different parts: economic recovery, the mining contribution to the Peruvian economy, fiscal revenue, and some forecasts that we have piled in the Peruvian Institute of Economics, and the risks and challenges that the mining sector faces in the country. So to start with the economic recovery, despite having one of the sharpest drops in GDP in the second quarter of last year, possibly the sharpest drop in the world, the Peruvian economy has demonstrated significant resilience, and the coming back period, especially in the second semester, has been really remarkable. Peru has recovered GDP by almost 40 percentage points, and by now it stands in a better year-to-year position than some of its regional peers, including Colombia, Chile, Mexico, and Argentina. So this is, I believe, a testimony of the strength of the Peruvian economy, in part dictated by internal demand that has propelled from the deep depths of April to a position now in which we stand better than some of our partners. As for this year and next year, the IMF and the World Bank forecast somewhat of a rebound between 7.5% and 9% of the economy. That's one of the most significant rebounds in 2021 in the region. It also, of course, comes after a very sharp drop in 2020. So there is a statistical effect in this number. But nevertheless, Peru is expected to return to his fourth quarter of 19 GDP. So it's pre-crisis GDP in mid-2022, whereas a significant amount of countries in the region are expected to go back to this to the pre-crisis GDP in 2023 or 2024. So again, sharp drop, but outstanding recovery in this few months. From a macroeconomic perspective, Peru is one of the most solid countries in the region, right there with Chile, and I would say one of the most solid developing countries in the world in macroeconomic perspective. So even though this crisis have taken a toll of course, in fiscal revenues and has demanded more expenses with a fiscal deficit of around 9% last year, Peru still holds a good position regarding to sovereign risk and credit ratings, as you may see in the graph. Also, when you look inflation or when you look exchange rates, Peru really stands out as one of the most solid macroeconomically speaking countries in the developing world. This has been definitely one of our core competitiveness facts in the last decades, and we expect it to keep it that way despite the big impact that we experienced last year as a consequence of the virus. Now, this is something that we are particularly proud of, and we are expecting to defend it. So going now to the mining part of the presentation, could be more interesting. Peru really stands out as one of the leading countries in mining activity in the region and in the world. It ranks second for copper, second for silver worldwide, and in different minerals, in different commodities, we're number 1 or number 2 in the region. This is also evidence that Peru is really a polymetallic country, and this becomes especially interesting to hedge some risks that could come from price fluctuations. We have gold in there, and we have copper in there, we have silver in there. So this different basket of minerals becomes pretty significant when there are pretty important when there are significant price fluctuations. And going to the key point of what I believe should be this presentation, Peru is a resource-rich country, and this is not the first time we've had a commodity boom or a goods boom that has some kind of like worldwide implications. This is you could think of this as part of previous cycles that we had in the past. So here we present some 3 different booms that we had in the last centuries. We have the guano, we have the nitrate, and we have the rubber. These are especially the guano and the rubber are export booms that lasted around 20 years, 25 years, if you say. We do believe that in the case of copper, especially of copper, we are just starting to see the peak or the boom. We're just starting to see we're just starting this cycle, and it will very likely last for another 10, 15, or 20 years. We do not believe there is a realistic substitution for copper in the short term, and this is something that will hold up Peru's growth for the next, again, 10, 15, perhaps 20 years. The Minister of Energy estimated that Peru should be producing around 5 million tons by 2021, but they made this prediction in, I believe, around 2013. We are still half from where the minister forecasted copper production would be around this time. We have that could also mean that means that we have significant room to growth in the following years, as I will try to convey in the next part of the presentation. So a little bit of a sum up of how important mining is for the Peruvian economy. It is on average in the last 10 years, if you say, it has been almost 10% of the GDP, around also 10% of fiscal revenue, 18% of corporate tax, 16% of private investment, and almost 60% of exports. So this is an economy that to some extent revolves around what the mining sector is doing, and I believe also what it's gonna be able to do. As just a quick note here, so and building from what we spoke before, almost 58-60% of exports are related to mining, and from there, the main one is copper, with gold following second place, around 1/3 of mining exports. However, what we see in the medium-term future is copper gaining more space as new projects are developed. Exploration in gold has, or lack thereof, or lack of exploration in gold has diminished some of the realistic projects that may come up to supplement, to give more supply in this mineral. Even when we're talking worldwide, and when we're talking about one of the big players like China, Peru still comes up as a significant supplier. So for copper, zinc, or lead, Peruvian exports are around 1/4 of China's imports. And so as China starts to pick up pace, what we believe strongly after the crisis of the virus last year, this will lead, as it's already leading, to higher prices and higher demand for some of our main exports, and this will probably continue through the next years. Now, I was saying that Peru has around 9-10% of its GDP related directly to mining, but that really doesn't convey the whole picture. There is much more that is related to mining than just that 10%. So what we try to measure in the Peruvian Institute of Economics using input-output tables is we're trying to capture this whole effect of mining in the Peruvian economy. So we don't only try to measure the direct impact, but also measure the indirect impact, which is its a relation in value chains and direct sectors that are linked to mining, and also the induced impact on mainly consumption of workers and company reinvestments. So this could capture a more holistic approach, a whole total effect of mining in the Peruvian economy. Now, it should be obvious that a sector that has 10% of GDP has some deeper links with the rest of the economy. So we divide this in different parts. So this is the GDP estimation. We identify a multiplier of 1.46 in GDP, meaning for each 1,000 soles of mining exports, we see now an extra output of about 1,400 soles. What's more interesting on this is that over half of the multiplier effects, again, that are not necessarily linked to the activity, occurs in different sectors of the economy, showing, again, the deep linkages that mining is having throughout the Peruvian economy. And this is also one of the key sectors that the Peruvian mining sector is gonna keep working in the next years, how to further develop intertwined routes with other sectors of the Peruvian economy, being manufacturing, being construction, mostly on the upper part of the chain. If we talk not GDP, but if we talk jobs, I believe the number is even more interesting. For every job creating in the mining sector in Peru, every direct job creating in the mining sector in Peru, we have 8 additional positions created in different sectors. So land transportation, agriculture, of course, manufacturing, of course, construction. This is a very interesting feature of the Peruvian mining sector, which is sometimes here portrayed as not creating many jobs. So because we all know it's a capital intensive activity. However, if you look at the more, I was saying, holistic approach, if you look at try to look at the whole picture, you really see that the connections that it has with the rest of the economy are significant and are probably becoming ever more significant as it grows on value. So talking about also taxes and fiscal contributions, we will talk a little bit more about shortly also. We have a regimen, taxing regimen that is really the total cost of it is, I would say, is about the same as we do as what you have in Canada, or it's an average of what you have in Canada, Mexico, Chile, and Peru's not significantly more costly in tax-wise than our main competitors. It's probably about the same. It's 47%. We estimated in the Peruvian Institute of Economics. We're talking about something close to 47% of total margin. Now this sums up the different taxes that we have in it. Mainly, of course, the main one being income tax, and there are some royalties also that have been changed and added in the last few years. Could be as a percentage of the sales, as it usually is in different countries. But I mean, key point here: taxes in Peru are not significantly different than what you can find in other countries in the region and in the world. Now, let me talk about some forecasts, which I believe should be the most interesting part of this presentation. Now, in the Peruvian Institute of Economics, we divided the official portfolio in 2 parts. So one is the projects that have a potential start date up to 2025, and that encompasses around $16 billion. These are projects that are in different stages of already moving forward. These are projects that hopefully should come up to 2025, and these are not random. These are the projects that the Minister of Mines have in their portfolio, and the numbers that we're going to use moving forward are averages of costs and prices within the last 10 years. So this is group 1. Group 1 is projects that have a start date of up to 2025, and we're talking around $16 billion. Now there is also group 2, which has around $37 billion. And this second group are projects that do not have a definite potential start date. So is a little bit more uncertain to see when will they start. But they encompass, again, a significant share of our investment portfolio. I believe it's also worth mentioning that unlike other countries, Peru's mining potential is not heavily concentrated in only one region. As you could see from the previous graph, and you can see from this graph, throughout the country, there are different opportunities to develop projects, mainly on copper, as we will see soon. So this is the distribution by mineral of Group 1 and Group 2. I believe what is very interesting to note here first, as I was saying, this is very related to copper, especially when we're talking about Group 2. We're talking about three-fourths of possible production in the next years related to copper. But it's also worth noting the levels that we are talking about. So in the average annual production, this is millions of soles. If the average annual production in the last decade was about $20 billion. So only for Group 1, again, start date 2025, according to official estimates, only there we're talking 10 billion. This is annual average production. And from Group 2, we're talking another 20 billion. So these are very significant numbers in a country that is already heavily invested in mining output. So this is this we believe again is a great opportunity, and talks a little bit more on the point that I was trying to make earlier on this cycle lasting for another hopefully 20-25 years. So what are some of the risks and challenges that we see moving forward? So there are, I would pile up in three different categories. We have some social conflicts going on. We have some regulatory problems, and we have some low and inadequate use of fiscal mining resources. So as far as social conflicts go, again, this is not something unique to Peru. There are many countries that experience this kind of issues, but it is something that we do worry about, and we are trying to address properly within the last 5-10 years. There are some ways forward. We need to start implementing a territorial development plan. We need to ensure some traceability for mining transfer. Social agreements have to be better negotiated and enforced. There are some issues here for current mining productions. Some such one is in Apurimac, and there are some issues here also related to new projects that have stalled in their construction in the last years because of these social issues. Namely, maybe the biggest one in the last years was Conga. That was some years ago, and more recently, Tia María, a copper project in Arequipa. So this is something that we need to address. I do believe that we are making some steps towards having a better systematic approach to this issue. The second thing that I was mentioning is this sometimes burden that you may feel from some regulations, even some unpredictability from some regulations, and the time that it takes to clear some of these regulatory hurdles. Now, to be absolutely clear, there is, of course, need for ever better, for ever improved environmental measures, and this has been the case in Peru. But at the same time, we have come up with duplicity in some of the ministers and some of the regulators and some of the government agencies asking for maybe the same type of permit, the same type of regulation, or sometimes, especially what we saw during the crisis, sometimes even being contradictory among themselves. So processes that in a different country could last perhaps 3 months or 6 months, Peru may last 2 years or 3. This is an issue, and you can see in the graph in the left there are new we have new regulations coming up significantly almost every year. And there is, however, a roadmap here that me, as a part of the Commission for Sustainable Mining Development from the presidency of the Council of Ministers last year, we developed a roadmap here that we believe is gonna hopefully guide some of the changes, some of the main policy actions that should be undertaken to clear some of these hurdles without harming at all any indigenous rights or any environmental rights. No one wants to go there, but perhaps, yes, simplify some of the duplicity and some of the overburdens that you may feel in the sector. Especially one of the key points here that we try to enforce was simplifying and making it more efficient, the paperwork and the regulations for exploration. Exploration has been going down in the last few years in Peru. We believe in part because of some excessive regulations that the sector has experienced. Again, there is a roadmap here for the future, and I hope the next administration will take it. Then the other topic that I was portraying here was the inadequate or low use of some of the canon and royalties that we receive from the mines. This in Peru, the structure that we have demands that the tax structure that we have demands that 50% of the income tax goes back to the region where the project is being developed or where the mining is exploiting, and also the royalties come back to the same region. This is to be used in local governments and the big regional governments of the state, if you were in the US. But they do not always have the institutional framework to use these resources correctly. And this becomes eventually a problem for the mining sector because it does not help build legitimacy for the sector if the people in the surrounding area do not see real material improvements in their own quality of life as a result of the taxes that are being paid. So if you do not see improvements in education infrastructure, or sanitation, in general water access, health, it's harder for the narrative that we want to portray that, hey, mining is a key ally in the economic and human development, not only in the macro scale in the country as a whole, but also in the closer to the region where the mining exploitation it's taking place. This is something that is incredibly important, but it does come. The improvements here are more challenging because it arises from a political institutional framework that is at times harder to address. There are, again, some recommendations that we made as part of the Commission for Sustainable Mining Development that hopefully would close these gaps. And with some of the consequences of this, of course, is expect to have a better light shown over the mining activity. Now, just to conclude, this has been the pace of the mining sector in Peru within the last 20 years. Of course, you see the drop in 2020 for obvious reasons, but the potential is still there. We still have some mines coming up relatively soon. We have Mina Justa, we have the big one, we have Quellaveco in Moquegua. That's over a $5 billion investment. This is a sector that is absolutely strategic for our economic growth and for our development as a country in the next 10 years, 20 years. We do believe this is a huge opportunity for us, huge opportunity for investors. The numbers that we are talking about are very significant and are very attractive. Conditions, as in many countries, have some challenges, but we are moving, I believe, in the right direction, and we expect to keep this cycle going up for at least some time. Prices are helping, international conditions are helping, and I believe inner conditions will be helping too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Macera, for your excellent presentation. Now we're going to conduct a different dynamic. We will have a panel that will discuss the economic analysis conducted by Diego Macera. We are honored to have the following panelists: Hugo María, Partner and Chief Economist at Apoyo Consultoría; Elmer Cuba, member of the Central Reserve Bank of Peru and partner at Macroconsult; and Alonso Segura, former Peruvian Minister of Economy and Finance. Gonzalo Tamayo, former Peruvian Minister of Energy and Mines, will be this panel's moderator.
Thank you, Carla. And thank you, Diego Macera, for that really interesting presentation that we just watched. So right now, we're having a panel of economists that are also my colleagues and friends. Among we have Hugo Santamaria. He's a PhD in economics by the Washington St. Louis University, and he's also a chief economist at Apoyo Consultoría and general manager of several companies. Here with us, we also have Alonso Segura, an economist from Católica University and UPenn. He is a former Minister of Economy and Finance during the former President Humala. He is also a lecturer at several universities, and he is a former chief economist at BCP and an IMF officer. Here with us is also Elmer Cuba, is a partner at Macroconsult. He's an experienced economist and a member of the Central Reserve Bank of Peru board. The Chamber has invited us for today to take into account Diego Macera's presentation, which was great, that basically highlights the importance of the mining sector. So we can basically discuss maybe what's coming up next in the agenda. We have a 50-minute session, and we will organize these presentations in 3 parts. Each of you will have 5 minutes to answer the questions that I will be asking, and then we will have 2 different blocks for these Q&A sessions, and then we will end up with a 3rd block in which we will have a more maybe free dialogue among our panelists. So as of now, to encourage today's discussion, I think that what Diego Macera concluded in the end was, of course, the importance that the mining sector has to do with the exports and in the world, in the development of the economy. And I think that we don't have any other economic activity that is more important than mining regarding the fiscal income and regarding the economic development, because this industry is really one of the best, and Peru is one of the best players in the world, and we are competing with many top countries in the world. So again, to encourage today's discussion, if we see all the government plans for this year's elections, of course, not all of them, but the main candidates that are in the ranking, we find that there is just a very limited comment on the mining sector. I think that just 2 candidates are mentioning copper or gold or silver. And Diego really showed us that Peru is ranked 2nd worldwide for this mineral production. And nonetheless, only just a few candidates talk about the mining activity. What also is happening is that we have an important topic, which is illegal and informal mining. And unfortunately, this has also been very little mentioned in the agenda. So I would like us to start reflecting on this situation in which we have two different sides of the conversation. We have the importance of mining, which is great, and then we also have this lack of mining plans in government plans. And this is, of course, a very important element that I think that should be included regarding public policies in these government plans. So let's start, Hugo, with you. Go ahead, please. All right, so thank you, Gonzalo. Good morning, everyone. Hello, Elmer, Alonso. I think that you're right, because when we review the government plans, indeed, we see that in some of them, we find just a really brief mentions of the mining sector. And I not only reviewed the government plans, but what these candidates have been declaring publicly. And for these elections, we see that there are basically no mentions of the mining sector in their plans and in their declarations. I think that the guidelines that are on the table are pretty declarative. I do agree with the fact that these candidates are not acknowledging the importance of the sector, and they are not only not recognizing the importance of the sector, but they are also not including the government issues related to this sector in Peru. It is really a surprise for us to acknowledge that Peru is one of the best players worldwide, having all of these obstacles from the government. I had the chance to work with the Mining Association and with the Central Bank in an analysis that was performed taking into account the administration and the regulations in this sector. This has become, of course, a really important issue to manage, and we have seen this problem growing in the last couple of years. We got to identify 232 different regulations. So not 20, not 40, 232. And these included almost 500 norms in which we would have 30 different agents, and 29 out of them are public entities. So within this context, we have that the formal sector has to act taking into account this framework. So if we analyze this legal scope, we performed an analysis of some of the environmental and mining regulations using the PCM perspective regarding the regulations and norms. So we just reviewed some of those almost 500 norms, and we created these analysis sheets. We analyzed like 76 out of them. We found that at least 7 processes should be repealed. We would need to create alternative mechanisms for about 60 of them, and some others need to be eliminated. So, if we are trying to boost this mining sector, and in order for us to really achieve success within the value chain, we need to really work in the form that we are managing the sector in this regulation and legal framework. In order for us to do that, we need, as you mentioned, to take a better look on these topics in the government plans. We need to take into account what's going on with the prior consultation, with the water resources rights, how to solve the different social conflicts. So all of those issues are involved in this regulatory framework. Some of these laws are inappropriate. Some of these could even be taken to some of our bureaucratic entities and in the copy, and some of them are even illegal or contradictory. So there is a need to reform those. We're having several agents, we're having weakness in our institutions from 20 years ago. And then we have seen with the years even more institutions being agents of these regulatory processes. And we have even found bad practices. I think we are taking restrictive measures for the prior processes, and then we are not performing a lot of posterior regulatory processes, because we all agree that we need to have a regulation into place, but there is a need to solve this regulation framework and to correct what's wrong. That should be a priority for the next administration, and I'm not seeing that reflected in the government plans. Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Hugo. Elmer, go ahead, please. All right, so the government plans exist as a requirement by the National Elections Jury. It's like saying, how many cars do you have? How many properties do you have? It's basically just a legal requirement, all right? Because we can see different things being said. At the end of the day, it's just a game, the own election process. Some of the things that weren't on the table sometimes are being performed. And some of these candidates need to win votes. And usually what they do is that they are trying to create a regular rationality. Right? So we all acknowledge the importance of the mining sector. However, on a day-to-day basis, a regular citizen that earns 1,400 soles a month, that maybe works in an informal sector, that works in agriculture, farming, or lives even in a rural area, does not have this perspective of mining being positive. So, for example, if we have a candidate that will mention mining as a really important issue, it may not be really advantageable, because we saw the president of the Minister Council being really clear about his mining perspective, and he was heavily criticized by society, and he was censored. So my concern would be that maybe the administration in place would have the approval of the Congress, for example. That would be a heavy load to work with. For example, right now we are having really ambiguous and unclear discourses. So mining includes different stakeholders, and at a local level, we see mining that is not only a really easy task to do. We are taking into account local and regional governments that usually do not have a bureaucratic equipment that is efficient. So we're having this mining boom from the last decade that really was translated into a great investment, but we haven't seen that in tangible results. We are not showing that, because citizens need to see tangible results. And in my opinion, I think that some of the investments are not being truly implemented correctly. So, for example, what would be the wage of a general manager of Antamina or Cerro Verde? I don't know. Maybe someone who earns 4,000 soles is able to manage 1,000,000 soles or $1 million? I'm not sure. We need to take into account the taxes that are being collected by the sector. So the ideal thing to do would be to create human capital investments that would actually help people. If we create that transformation to create renewable resources by using human capital, then that would be an advantage. However, we need to change our perspective regarding investments through the local and regional governments. We need to create strategies to break the different obstacles in order for us to have tangible results and to create a positive impact in people's lives. Some of these investments are only allocated to public investments and to the cement industry. And I agree with Hugo when it comes to the regulatory framework. We need to reform some of our institutions, taking into account the OAFA or the SBS. We need to create a better participation of the private sector to really create a strong institutional framework. Thank you, Elmer. Alonso, please go ahead. All right, Gonzalo, thank you so much. And now it's a pleasure for me being here with you. I totally agree with what has been said. Government plans in general are not an accurate indicator of what will be conducted in reality when the administration will be set up. I think that also applies for the mining sector, and I totally agree. We don't have a lot of information regarding this in the government plans, and I think that the declarations may be really different regarding the plans. And I'm seeing that mining policies may take a different path. I think that what is clear, in fact, is that there is a lack of an strategic perspective on how we could boost this mining potential. And I think that Elmer mentioned really important things. First of all, regarding the regulatory framework and the active agents regarding environmental, social, and governance standards. In the world, we see that these are being even more rigorous. And of course, the mining sector needs to follow those standards. So the thing here is that the regulation agencies should work efficiently and in an organized way. And for that, we, of course, need to organize all the different paperwork and bureaucratic burden that we have in our Peruvian economy. The entities, the public entities, have a problem in which they operate undistinctly. So sometimes companies do not feel that they are taking part of this process. The executive table in the mining sector is trying to find new ways of creating a better inclusion in public investment for mining. Then we will be talking about the prior consultation of one of the main topics. We can have different standards for the exploration stage and with other stages of the mining project. That doesn't make any sense. And maybe you can check the stats or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think just 1 out of 100 projects actually gets to the exploration stage. So I think that there is a need to create a better cooperation throughout these stages and regarding resources. I think that the strategic role of the state needs to be better. We tried to do this in the past, but we see that the state hasn't got to those poor and disadvantaged areas that we're having. But that is a really important issue. The government really needs to take an active participation in these areas so the population can actually acknowledge the real benefits of the mining activity. Otherwise, only the operators are having all of this burden with them. So in my opinion, I think that we haven't put in the real hard work to create strategies, to develop institutional strategies with the government to allow us to operate in a more organized and efficient way. We have a lot of errors going on. We have a lot of rotation of the officers, and that is, of course, an obstacle for creating these strategies for development. So I think that in order for us to have a better conditions towards our institutional framework, we need to also promote other economic activities. And for that, we need to really understand that the mining activity is not the only one that needs to be developed. And it's not the only one that needs to receive support. And last but not least, I would like to mention, and this comes from my experience, that I think that every administration really needs to work on the social conflict side of the matter. This is something that involves or that includes all the different government agents. And we as a country, unfortunately, we haven't got the opportunity to really develop such social strategies that will create benefits for our population. That is still a work in progress, and there is still a lot of things to do. And sometimes they create really short-term plans or reactive plans trying to offer really anything, and then that is disregarded because more issues are created in the path. Of course, we need to have a better coordination with the private sector investment, which is fundamental. I think that is one of the main issues that we still need to work on as a country, and we need to keep on developing our mining potential. Thank you. Thank you so much all for respecting the time. And I wanted to just maybe repeat what Alonso mentioned, that the mining activity is one of the most competitive activities that we have worldwide. And of course, we might be jeopardizing its productivity because of the different measures that are being implemented or the different obstacles that we're having and that are growing, unfortunately, regarding the projects. And I think that one of the things that Elmer mentioned was that, of course, government plans are just a legal requirement, and I would like to maybe take some of the Hugo's words that we need to create better strategies. And our second question for the panel would be that, of course, we want to create a better message regarding the mining sector. Maybe when it comes to Forsyth, Guzman, Acuña, these candidates are looking to develop mining, taking into account legislation and environmental standards. They are trying to work towards a better management of the water resources. And of course, we know Veronica Mendoza's and Arana's proposal. And then we're talking about innovation in Soto's proposal that in some sort of way is proposing to extend the rights of the underground territory. That is part of his rationale in his government plan. And Acción Popular with Johnny Lescano are trying to elaborate a new mining cadastre. And on top of that, they are looking to change the legislation in order for companies that are working with natural resources will become operators managed by the state. And then we will be breaking the current framework in which natural resources are being extracted by the mining concession, and they have a free availability of such resources. So now, maybe I would like you to discuss this topic further on, and I would maybe love to hear some of the other measures that you may have heard. All right, so let's start with you, Elmer. All right, Gonzalo, so when it comes to Soto's and Lescano's discussion, they are basically talking about who will be the one who will get the last pizza slice. So they're talking about royalties, and of course, we need to pay tax revenues. So then the investor will take his money in the pocket. So what is being proposed is that the government should share both the superficial and the underground territory, right? And that is basically a really radical change. And what Lescano is proposing is that there is a need to change the legislation. That is really, I think that in that sense, Soto's proposal is more radical, of changing that legislation and to change the availability of the resources. I think that there is a need of changing the rules of the game. But then when it comes to Arana or Mendoza's proposal, they are not basically discussing this topic, but they are planning on creating more obstacles within this mining sector, and they are biased by their own ideological convictions. I think that is strange, that is odd for a country that is a leader in the mining sector to have more obstacles, because Peru is one of the top leaders in mining apart from exports or apart from the gastronomical sector, and we are creating more existential doubts. So I think that, in my opinion, that is absurd. But nonetheless, this is the political framework that we are having with these leaders that are carrying these messages. But we are seeing a reality here. When we see any sort of communities, we have a lot of inequality. We have a lot of inequality going on, and that inequality can get worse. For example, in a mini market, I don't know, the attorney or the legal major in such community can have a better job thanks to mining. However, not all of the people who are in that area will benefit from mining. So, all right, the major would need to redistribute the needs of its people, because we are not having efficient people in these positions. We are having corrupt people. So we really need to think well these mechanisms and how to create value in the mining sector. Regarding, for example, the water resource management, we need to create a better administration that will be highly qualified and that will be efficient and that will work towards to changing positively people's lives, and that won't be lying or doing something else. I think that we have had some of the best international exporters, and we need to keep on working on getting those resources that are having that electoral framework that is correct, that will create a really positive impact in these communities. But right now, we need to take into account a state-of-the-art social policies. Thank you, Elmer. Alonso? All right, so I think that Gonzalo and Elmer have already explained what are the proposals of the government plans. So just to comment a little bit on that, I think that some of the proposals are, in my opinion, wrong and dangerous for the mining development. Some other proposals, if they were put in practice, would create more obstacles for the development of the activity that will have even worse consequences in the sector. And some proposals are basically non-existent regarding the topic. I think that it's hard to forecast what would actually happen if these proposals are put into place within these government changes or these government plans, especially for those that are proposing more radical changes. We wouldn't know if they will actually do that or not. But what we know is that the focus is not the right one regarding the resource appropriation. We need to create a better way of distributing these resources. And that is another topic that I think is an issue, because we need to take what is the government take of this generation of investment in mining. We need to align ourselves to international standards. And of course, we might say that we need to change this and that, but in practice, maybe we need to take into account if we're having the right levels. I need to take into account how am I going to manage such resources, and we have issues there because we're having a centralization framework regarding the fiscal activities. And how can I say this? It's basically unequal because we are not having some sort of royalties in having an explanation of what is being done with the investments and with the resources. So regarding the mining canon, we would need to have that really deployed in a really important way. We need to take into account what is going on with our resources, and on the other hand, we need to take into account what is going on with our expenditures. Elmer also mentioned that in the previous round, and we see that we don't have the right impact regarding the mining resources that we have got in the last 15 years. That is true. But we have an issue there that has to do with the autonomy of the regional and local governments. Sometimes these strategies are unclear and they are not closing the bridges. So what I would think would be important would be to change our focus on that direction. But in this, I don't know, political proposal, I acknowledge that it is easier for them to just say A and then in practice do B regarding, I don't know, the private sector or private investors. I think that at the end of the day, if we have a new elected administration, there would be a need of changing its focus. Because if I remember correctly, we are talking about $70 billion in investment for this sector, and that needs to be developed in the next decade. And of course, for that, we need to have a better redistribution of such resources, because the government take is reasonable, and we need to take into account how the resources are being used at the different government levels, and indeed, not only at a district or area level, because we have a lot of inequalities, but internally of the different provinces. So I think that the agenda is working towards that day. It's of course a really complex thing because it needs a lot of the administration participation and how to use those resources.
Thank you, Alonso. Please go ahead, Hugo. Thank you, Gonzalo. Well, Elmer and Alonso have covered almost all topics, so I think I'm going to give a brief summary on what they have said, and I'm going to add some points. First, I would like to comment on the candidates' proposals. I think some of these proposals are only sufficient for a tweet. I think they are based on a lack of knowledge or a knowledge to see the glass half full. And this knowledge is very limited regarding all the mining activity. I think some candidates think that the mining activities are only the minings in operation, and they don't realize that to get to this point, to generate value and pay taxes, there are several previous stages from exploration and initial geology that involve a lot of risk capital, a lot of time, and a lot of technology. So I think that maybe we can discuss on this, but my opinion is that the Peruvian state is not capable now to carry out this investment, this risk investment, and then cover all the stages with the level of technology that we require to say maybe we have here a mine, that I own this mine, and the citizens eventually, according to another candidate, are also owners of this mine. So I think we cannot discuss, we cannot analyze these proposals. And regarding Elmer and Alonso's opinions of this issue, this is a large issue with a lot of elements involved. It has to do with the operation, the environmental issues, and actually the highest pressure in the regulation side is international, and it's here to stay. I think we have to acknowledge this. We have to acknowledge these regulations, and we have to be close to the regulatory agencies. But we have lots to correct and clean, both in regulations and in regulation administration. Not eliminate them, but to correct them. Some things are sincerely poorly executed and poorly administered, and we have to clean that. And Alonso proposes this complete idea that goes to the value generation and to the tax collection and also the distribution of these resources in benefit of the citizens. And also here we need a comprehensive change. But I would like to add that this may take a lot of time, and it requires a solid political goodwill. So what can we do in the meantime? And here I would like to provide like a light at the end of this tunnel. We conducted a revision of 10 years of service in the areas of influence of different mining projects, 16,000 observations, 10 years of mining development, and we saw that because of the status quo, almost 1 out of 4 citizens are in favor of mining projects. But we discovered that the private sector have the possibility to increase this, let's say, positive perspective towards a mining project. How? Through really concrete actions that don't depend on the state, but depend on the companies. For example, we found out that a critical element is the perception of the citizens, the neighbors of the mining project, regarding the mine workers, how these workers are behaving in the community, not only the workers, but also the family members and suppliers in general. Also, we saw that the perception regarding the water management issue was key. And we think here we have a great communication opportunity that could be managed from the private sector, and also regarding the potential benefits of the mine in the area. But the most important element was how the community perceived all the people who were involved in the mining operations. So while we are working in these reforms and corrections and adjustments, we find that the private company is able to move some things there and to improve the environment, not only for the company, but also for the citizens and the community surrounding the mine operations. Thank you. Thank you, Hugo. And we're going to move to the last segment. I would like to propose 3 topics. The first one is the Fraser Survey. We have lost 10 positions in competitivity. In general, Latin America is decreasing in this survey, and we have seen a decreasing trend that we have to reverse. And in this discussion on supporting the mining sector, sometimes we don't reflect on what we have lost because we haven't executed some projects. Renzo Rossini, 2 years ago, presented in a Congress an estimate regarding what would have happened if we had developed 5 mining projects that now are stopped, including Tia María, Conga, Cerro Blanco, and others. Of course, our tax collection would have been different, and also we would have implemented some infrastructure. And none of the government plans are mentioning Quellaveco. That is a mega project that is being constructed, and it's already contributing. but of course they are not mentioned in Tia Maria. So now I'm remembering the double speak of Martin Vizcarra. When he was mentioning in a discussion with local governments, he was talking in favor of this project. But on the other side, when he was in a closer environment, he was against Tia Maria. So this type of, let's say, double speak is very concerning for a new government. And another topic that I would like to discuss is that nowadays we are seeing a significant increase in all the raw material prices, and including metals, of course. We focalize in copper, but also molybdenum and zinc and gold prices are increasing. And this is going to help not only for the economic reactivation and the income increase, but something that is very important, the tax collection. This is going to help our fiscal position post-COVID. Another topics, for example, I participated with Diego in the Commission for Sustainable Development Mining with some other friends in common. And here we got some suggestions that Diego has mentioned to promote exploration, the canon topic. And this document was published on February of last year. And also I was surprised that none of the political parties have mentioned this tool that try to be really helpful to find some points of improvement. Canon, of course, we have a great challenge on this topic. And our government structure has the local governments as executing units. But also in the areas that are close to the mining projects or oil projects, we have communities. And sometimes the presence of the communities is closer even than the national authorities. So frequently the conflicts are because the majors don't canalize these resources to the communities or the districts. And here we have a huge issue on how to help to use these resources. Another topic that I would like to reflect on, I think that we are going to have a fragmented Congress. A Congress that maybe the way they are going to change the regulations is going to be unpredictable. I hope that this is not the case, especially in a context where the international market is favorable for the mining activity. Maybe we can close with some comments on these ideas or any other topic that was mentioned by any of the panelists. Please go ahead. Your mic, you're muted. Yes. Yes, you have 5 minutes. Okay, great. I'm going to comment on all of these topics. Of course, Peru has decreased in the last competitivity survey, also Chile, but this is not the case for all Latin American countries. So it's important to know that we have some ways on recovering this competitivity. Part of the comments that Hugo and Elmer have made in this panel, I think, may help to recover this competitivity. In this sense, I agree with Hugo. There is a part that is the ideal part, the reforms that we have to implement in mining, and also resource distribution. And of course, we're going to have this Congress, and the Congress that will be formed by some people, and we will find this like a mission impossible. So we will have to see in which ways we may generate improvements for the resource usage. It's very difficult to predict prices, but let's say that at least in the following couple of years, because of the global monetary policies, I think it's not possible that these prices are going to decrease. But most importantly, for some raw materials, especially copper, our main export, we have evidence that the prices are going to increase in the long term. For example, to face the climate change for electric cars, for example, we need copper, among other minerals that we produce. So it's difficult to be certain about this, but I would say that we are going to face many years of good prices for the minerals, and we have to benefit from this situation. We have to benefit from the investment and other stages. But for this, we have to have a clear idea and not eliminate whatever is working now. And then how to generate consensus and also to pave the journey for these projects. Unfortunately, the political environment in Peru is not looking very well. You already have commented on this in the introduction. The Congress perspectives that we're having, the authorities that we have mentioned. Unfortunately, we have a centralization that is very complex and not very adequate, and also a political environment in all the levels of the government that make very difficult to achieve national governments that will be aligned to the interests of the country or even the development of their own territories. As you mentioned, it's frequently that the national authorities are disconnected from the communities that live in their areas. So we have a complex agenda, but I think we have to be clear and we have to know that we will have some very favorable times for the prices. And we have around $60 million in investment, and all that this is going to generate by incremented production, and of course the tax collection and employment and all the benefits. We have mentioned this agenda, and we hope that the political authorities will implement some of these ideas. Thank you. Go ahead, please, Hugo. Thank you, Gonzalo. Just some short comments on this topic. First, regarding the Fraser Survey and competitivity, I think the important thing is that the authorities have to understand that Peru and the mining projects are competing with others. It's not true that because we have mineral, we are going to have the investment. You have been Minister Gonzalo, and you know very well the situation. The operators are looking at this project, they are looking at the budgets, but they have a limited budgets, are huge budgets, but these are huge investments as well. And we are competing for the effort in exploration, in construction, in infrastructure with other projects. And if a large mining company has a large project being developed in another place, it is very possible that the one that was going to be developed in Peru is going to be stopped. So it is important to benefit from this cycle that I feel is going to be really positive, and that I think we are not prepared to benefit from it. If the projects are stopped for a long time, they are just rejected, and the mining companies are going to move elsewhere. So we are not going to get the capital today and be the development tomorrow. And then also regarding what Alonso said and Elmer, I'm always thinking about these ideas. And of course, when we are talking about the reforms in different sectors, we need political solutions that will be implemented at a long time, to think about a state level, to can have this state that is working. And I think that the political system that we have now have very short-term incentives. It's very unpredictable, and the policies are based on the individual that are meeting each other some days or weeks before, and then they make a group in the Congress. So it's very difficult to achieve this reality. So something that Peru has to face in the following years is a political reform that will produce a political system that will work, that is going to allow to engage in these long-term reforms and not in the easy answers that at the long term are worse than the problem. In this sense, in these reforms, I think it's very important to look at the institutional framework so that mining will find a good partner in the state. But for that, we need that all the government agencies comply with all the requirements. So I think that surrounding the mining operations, we need large efforts, and we need large political alliances, and to have this long-term perspective, and not only to think on what the news are going to say tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Hugo. And finally, Elmer. Yes, I'm trying to summarize everything that we have talked about. I think Peru has the resources indeed. We have been really lucky about this. And also, I think the prices are going to be increasing for a long time. The issue is not the mineral grade. The issue is the Peruvian society. We cannot organize ourselves to get profit from these resources. So the mechanisms as Peruvian society, Peruvian states, we are not at the same level as the natural resources that we have in the underground. We should have, with these resources and these prices, we should be having a boom in the exploration. We should be having lots of companies in the Andean region, and this is not happening. So something is failing, and we are failing. It's not the fault of the copper. It's not the fault of the copper molecule. It's the fault of the Peruvian society. We thought we have solved these issues because on the last decade, on the last boom, we had new mining projects, the extension of Cerro Verde, Toromocho, Las Bambas, the extension of Southern, Antamina, and the last son of this generation is now going into production, that is Quellaveco. But then we don't have anything else of this magnitude for this new cycle. I'm talking about this new cycle of price increase. And maybe we will have a good canon and good taxes out of this cycle, but we are not generating anything new. We have not been able to organize ourselves. So the failure, I think, it's more in the central governments and also in the regional and local governments. As we can see, there are some issues on the opportunity equality. The growing is not inclusive, not even at a local level. At the local level, we have a group of governors that are looking only for resources. So we have to conduct some studies to identify good examples in the country. And also, we are identifying some problems. For example, where the corruption is an issue. So we could use this experience to learn and to implement. So maybe we may profit at least from the second part of this positive cycle that it looks to be for a long time. And this is going to be a great demand for copper for the following years. But if we don't get our house together, we are going to be like this family where all the siblings are fighting against each other, and they don't even sell or they don't even rent the house. So we were not able to organize ourselves to keep this richness in the country. So the issue is the political level. It doesn't depend depend on the Ministry of Mines and Energy. It's the political issues that have created these problems. We have to fight the corruption and we have to organize ourselves to get profits from this cycle. Thank you. Thank you, Elmer. Just a couple of thoughts regarding this. Please don't forget that during the COVID crisis and the quarantines and the lockdowns, the mining sector has been a leader in providing oxygens and also medical devices to save the lives of thousands of people and providing this type of equipment. And just by reviewing Alonso's comments, yes, maybe Chile had also a drop, but also Colombia increased and Southern Argentina was recovered in a very fast way. So within Latin America, we can find some regions that are improving faster in terms of attracting the investment. So I would like to thank the members of the panelists, Hugo, Alonso, and Elmer. Thank you for your attendance. And of course, thanks to Diego for his excellent presentation. And back to you, Carla. Thank you.